This is an overview of the string class. A string is a collection of characters surrounded by double quotes. Strings can contain letters, spaces, digits, and punctuation. In Java, there is no primitive type for strings. Instead, there's a string class. String variables are object variables. You can include special characters inside of your strings by using what is called an escape sequence. You can use a / double quotes to include double quotes in your string, like this example here. You can use \n to include a new line. You can also use \t for tab, \single quote for a single quote, and \/ to include a backslash in your string. Remember to put these escape sequences inside the double quotes so that they are a part of your string. There are many useful string methods that can be used to evaluate and work with strings. The length method tells you how many characters are in a string. In this example, the string variable message is what is called the invoking object. Invoking the length method returns on this object returns 6 because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters in the string. The char@at method returns a character at a specific position in the string. String indexes start at position 0. In this example, the invoking object is again message. The number 11 is the parameter we pass in. This is the position we're looking for. Because indexing starts at 0, the position in character 11 is the exclamation point. If you pass an invalid value like a negative number or a number that's too big, the method will throw an exception and your program will crash. Remember, string indexes start at 0. So the largest index in any string is that string's length minus 1. The index of string.length is not a valid index, and trying to access that will crash your code. The indexOf method returns the index of the first occurrence of a specific character or string within the invoking string. The last indexOf method returns the last occurrence, if there's more than one. If the string or character is not found, the -1 is returned. And remember that indexing is 0-based, meaning the first index is position 0. In these examples, the index of the character o is 4, and the last index is 7. The index of the string hello is the index where that string begins, which is 0. And since the string just doesn't appear in the message, invoking last index of on that string will return -1. Strings are a special kind of object called an immutable object. This means that when you invoke a method on a string variable, it doesn't change the value stored in the variable. There are lots of methods in the string class that create a new modified string, but it's important to remember that that is what invoking those methods will do, create a new string. Invoking a method on a string variable does not change that invoking object. If you want to modify a string, you have to create a new string and store it back into the original variable. Let's look at an example of that now. The two lowercase and two uppercase methods will return a new string that is either in all lowercase or all uppercase letters. In this example, we invoke two uppercase on the message variable. This creates a new string with hello in all capital letters. We then store that string into the variable upper message. What's important to note here is that the original message variable has not been changed. It cannot be changed because it's immutable. So a new string is created and we store it into this very different variable. Similarly, if we invoke message.toLowercase, this creates a new string in all lowercase letters, and we store that in the variable lower message. But the value of message remains unchanged. The only way to get a new value in a string variable is to reassign that variable to a new value. In this last statement, we invoke toUppercase, which creates a new string with all capital letters, and we then store that new string back into the message variable, which will overwrite the previous value. So message now stores the all uppercase hello. Strings being immutable is one of the key ideas to remember about strings. It is most likely a mistake if you invoke a string method that creates a new string and then you don't either store it in a variable, print it, or do something else with it. Be careful about this. The replace method replaces all instances of one character with another. This method is case sensitive. In this first example, we replace all of the uppercase L's with 1s. We then replace all of the uppercase O's with 0s. The call to replace the lowercase d will have no effect because this string does not contain any lowercase d's. Remember that because strings are immutable, at the end of these statements, our message variable will remain unchanged. But we do update password each time by creating that new string and then storing it back in the password variable. To concatenate strings means to join them together. You can do this with the concat method, but it's most common to see the plus sign operator used. When this operator is used with strings, it performs concatenation instead of numeric addition. You can also use the plus equals operator to concatenate a string and then store it back into the same variable. Remember that just like any expression, we evaluate the right-hand side first and then store that result in the variable on the left. And because strings are immutable, using them on the right-hand side will not change the value of the invoking object. In this first example, the value of greeting and place are not changed. Those values are just used to create a new concatenated string that we store in message. In the second example, using greeting plus equals hello is equivalent to saying greeting equals greeting plus hello. We evaluate this right-hand side first, which creates the string hello hello, and then we store that value back into greeting, overwriting the previous value. You can use the plus operator with strings and numbers. If both operands are numbers, addition is performed. If both operands are strings, concatenation is performed. If you have one string and one number, then concatenation is performed. And the plus operator is always evaluated from left to right. Be careful when using this operator with a string and a number to make sure you're getting the result that you want. In this example, we evaluate the plus operator from left to right. So the string the sum is concatenated to x, which creates a new string, and that's then concatenated to y. So this will print the sum is 34, which is obviously an error. In the second example, we force the addition to happen first using parentheses, and then we concatenate that onto the string. Be careful anytime you're using the plus operator with strings and numbers together. The string class has two substring methods. One method takes a single parameter and creates a new string starting from that specified index and going to the end of the string. In this first example, we find the substring starting at index 9 and going to the end of the string. The other substring method takes two parameters. This method creates a new string starting at the first index and going up to, but not including the second index. In the second example, we find the substring starting at index 6 and going up to, but not including index 8. When using the two-parameter substring method, it's a good check to remember that the difference in the parameters will be the length of the substring created. In this case, 8 minus 6 is 2, and the length of my is 2. And of course, remember that indexing starts at 0 and that strings are immutable. So in both of these cases, the greeting string remains unchanged. To determine if two strings contain the same text, use the equals method. If you don't care about capitalization, use the equals ignore case method. In this example, invoking equals on quiet and passing in loud will return false because these two variables do not contain the exact text. Invoking equals ignore case will return true because if we ignore the capitalization, they do contain the same text. When comparing strings for equality, always use the equals method. Do not use the double equal sign. The equals method is the appropriate way to compare strings, and all objects, for logical equivalence. When you want to know if two strings have the same text, use the equals method. If you want to know if they have the same text, ignoring capitalization, then use the equals ignore case method. Using the double equal sign might give you unexpected results, so do not use this to compare strings. You can use the compare to and compare to ignore case methods to find out if one string comes before another. These methods use lexicographic ordering, which is alphabetic ordering except all of the uppercase letters come before all of the lowercase letters. These methods will return a negative number if the invoking object comes first, a positive number if the invoking object comes second, and 0 if the strings are equal. It's important to note that you might not compare strings yourself very often with these methods, but the compare to method is used behind the scenes when you want to accomplish a task like sorting a list of strings. Even though you might not invoke these methods directly often, some examples of what they return are shown here. If you invoke compare to on lowercase apple and pass in lowercase zebra, you get a negative number because apple comes before zebra. If you pass in uppercase apple, you get a positive number because remember that all the uppercase letters come first. If you were to invoke compare to ignore case, then you'd get a 0. If you invoke compare to on uppercase yak and pass in lowercase mouse, you get a negative, again because all of the uppercase letters come first. If you pass in compare to ignore case, you'd get a positive because y comes after m. One important thing to note is that you do not know, and you don't need to know, what the actual number is that's returned. Just knowing if it's positive, negative, or zero tells you what you need to know about how the strings are ordered. One final note about strings. There's a special string called the empty string. This is a string with length 0. It has no characters. It's represented by 2 double quotes with nothing in between them. Note that the empty string is not the same as null, and it is a real string value. The empty string is often good to use as an initial value for string variables if you don't yet know what the value will be. Strings are something you'll use all the time in Java. We've talked about some common string methods, but there are many more to learn about if you visit the Java String API page. And keep in mind these key ideas you've learned about strings. Strings are immutable, string indices start at 0, and always compare strings for equality using the equals or equals ignore case method. Happy coding, Java monsters!